So basically what we're going to be doing is you have one longer piece of fabric and one shorter piece of fabric. So many of you have probably seen like dresses that are like fitted in the bodice or like the top of your dress, but then have like a gathered waist, right? Can you guys kind of vision that a little bit? So this is practicing that, or any of those like tiered dresses or skirts. A lot of times those are gathered as well to sort of give essentially the tiered effect. So it always starts with a larger piece of fabric. And something that we're going to be doing first is we're going to sew 3 rows of basting stitches. Okay, basting stitches are temporary stitches, so there's something we're going to take out. On our machine, you're going to be on a straight stitch. However, you're going to click the plus sign on your length button until it goes up to as high as it can go, which is a 5. Okay, so you're still on stitch 1, just the length is at a 5. The other difference with a basting stitch is you do not backstitch. Do not backstitch at the beginning, do not backstitch at the end. If you do that, it will not gather. Okay, the other thing you need to make sure to do is leave your tails of thread long on each of the basting seams, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, so when you do, we're essentially doing 3 parallel rows. On your direction sheet, it tells you to do 4/8, 5/8, and 6/8. You can do that. You can also do 3/8, 4/8, and 5/8. You can also do that. I'll do with the directions set. I'm gonna do 4/8, 5/8, and then 6/8. So you do one at a time. So I'll take my tape and I'm going to move it. There's a line between 3/8 and 5/8, which is 4/8. So we're gonna place that there. I'm just the longer piece you're going to take. Okay, and I'm going to line up the edge that I'm going to gather with my tape. No back stitching, so you're just gonna bruise right across, just like so. No back stitching at the end, and you do want to leave your tail long. Okay, it doesn't have to be like obnoxiously long, but leave it longer, so don't cut it short. Okay, you'll notice that it might try to like naturally gather it a little bit depending on the fabric that you have, but you have 1 row, no back stitching. Then we're going to move our tape to our next measurement, which is going to be 5/8. Okay, you do not want your rows to cross. Okay, so just keep that in mind too. So now I'm going to do the next one. Okay, so I line it up with my tape, so I move that to 5/8, and I'm gonna sew it down. Again, don't let them cross, which if you're paying attention to your tape, they really shouldn't. You can also see a little bit as you go. Maybe go a little slower on this one. Leave that tail long as well. Okay, these tails are gonna be important. So I've got 2 rows. Now I'm going to go on to my last one. I'm going to go to 6/8, which you have to look at the metal part for this. Up at the top, I'm going to go right there. And then again, I'll sew 1 more row. No back stitching. Leave your tail long. Okay, so now you have your 3 rows of basting stitches. Then what you want to do, so each of these tails essentially has 2 threads to it. So what you want, and they're going to be like kind of twisted, which could be a little tricky. I like to use my, oh, that's not an organized, let's use a seam ripper. I'm not going to rip it, I'm just using the tip of this to separate my threads, and I'll explain that in a second. So let me do it first and then I'll show you. So I'm just taking all the threads from the top. Again, I will show you this in a moment. I'm not ripping it, I'm just getting the thread. I'll push those out of the way. So if you look closely, you have 3 threads essentially on the front, and then the 3 threads from the bobbin on the back. I'm gonna take all 3 of my threads from the front together. I'm gonna hold it in my hand, and then you should be able to carefully gather. So it's kind of a little, can't do it all at once. And also depending on the fabric you choose, it may be a little easier or a little trickier. So I'm holding these 3 together, and I'm just kind of scrunching it and moving it down as I go. Bless you over there. So you're moving your gathers across. You can technically come from both sides too. So you find the balance of giving it a little tug, but don't pull too hard. You don't want to rip your threads. If you rip your threads, you have to restart. Nobody wants to do that, but you really do have to restart because there's no other way. So it's gathering nice and down. Let's speed this part up in the demo. So I'm just kind of holding on to those 3 threads, working my way across, pulling the gathers down. Again, I can also switch sides and go from the other side as well, but I'm just gonna stick with the one side for now. Move those gathers across. And now I'm definitely gathering it more than the piece in front, or my shorter piece, but then I'll be able to space it out so they're nice and even. So that part that's important is taking the 3 threads and separating them and gathering it down. Now these basting stitches will eventually take them out, but you'll take them out after I sew it to the other piece. We're almost there. Just want to get it all the way to the end so I can make it nice and even. You can see it's starting to gather up. Okay. Then, now that we have plenty of gathers because it's shorter than this piece, I can just sort of move it to even it out. And so what you would do in this situation is you're going to be, do a little bit more. You would be sewing this pretty sides together. So just like we do before. So that looks good. So again, this is just kind of hot pink fabric, so you can't really tell what is the right or the wrong side. But let's say this is the pretty side, and let's say this is the pretty side. Pretty sides together, okay? And then you're going to actually make these match at the top. Put some pins in there to hold it in place. And then the last step is you're gonna actually sew right over these gathers, and you'll sew a regulation seam. So once I have my pins in place, okay, so when you're looking at this, you have gathers on one side, but then the other side should be flat. So I've got my gathers, but it's flat on this side, right? So that after I sew this and it opens up, kind of like that, this would be like your fitted bodice, and then this would be like a gathered skirt. Notice how you can see the basting stitch below. You'll remove that after you sew. So right now you have to leave it there so it holds it in place. All of these other threads will be cut off as well, but you can do that afterwards. So then you do have to make sure on your machine that you go back to your regular settings so you're not doing another basting stitch. You can do that by just clicking one. It will reset all your settings. And then you'll move your tape back to 5/8. And you're gonna sew a 5/8 inch regulation seam. Okay, just wait for 1 sec though. So then I'll just sew my regulation seam, back stitch now. So right over your gathers. seconds as you go. And then my threads are just getting a little caught. And then you're going to back stitch. Lift up your presser foot. Now you can cut those threads off. Before I remove the basting stitches, kind of check on this side how it looks, right? And then the last step, you would actually go back and remove any of the stitches that are showing. It's a combination of sometimes you're really lucky and you can pull the basting right out. There's a lot of threads going on, but you might be able to just kind of pull it out. If it does, great. If it doesn't, you can use your seam ripper and anything that's showing on the outside, you're going to get that to come off. Does that make sense? All right, you guys can get started.